Hey, beautiful brain retrainers. I just wanted to jump on today and chat a little bit about what we're all feeling and how we can tap more into our emotions within our brain retraining and just keeping things simple. So I think sometimes we overcomplicate brain retraining. We think we have to write out these strategic journals and scripts and plans, and really with an integrative approach, what I'm hoping we can gain is the idea of leaning more into our feelings and our intuition. And I understand the idea that sometimes our intuition becomes damaged when our limbic system becomes dysregulated. But when we prompt ourselves to spend more time in nature and more time in community, and we come up with a list of our values and think about how we want our life to look based on our values and what feels good to us, then we tap into that intuitive side of healing. And I say all the time that, we have everything we need to heal or to start working on our healing journey, but oftentimes we're being told that we don't or that it's not possible. So I think a big part of that is the mindset and tapping into our emotional selves. And when we think about what initially caused the limbic system dysregulation, it always goes back to trauma, right? Part of being human is having stressors and traumas come up. We can't avoid them. But for some of us, because we're, going through different things at different times in our lives, maybe we had a lot of trauma as a child, and this could be trauma we think of with a big T, like an abuse or an accident or something very traumatic like an injury or a very significant illness. But it can also be an accumulation of smaller traumas, just not feeling safe or dealing with subtleties that made us feel scared or afraid or alone over time. And so what it comes back to is realizing where that started. And when those traumas happened and parts of ourselves fractured off to protect or to compartmentalize, that's where I think a lot of that limbic system injury began to take form. And that's why for some of us, we might see other people that are like going through life and having a lot of the same exposure to triggers or stressors. And it's like, well, why aren't they dealing with these complex issues like chronic pain and chronic illness? And I think a lot of it goes back to what kind of trauma have you been through and what kind of trauma have they been through, and what is that collective wear and tear on your limbic system. Some people, we're riding around with a limbic system that's like a 2008 Ford that's just like rusted and falling apart, and it's like, it's not your fault. You've just been through a lot more than someone who kind of got started out with a new car. And so how do we rebuild that? And it doesn't mean that it's never going to work again. It's just maybe we're going to have the refurbished antique car that takes a while to rebuild it, and then it works just as good as the brand new one, if not better. But it does take work. And if it feels like, it's not fair that I have to work harder than others, like, no, it's not. But also that's kind of life. Life is messy, and we get so caught up sometimes on what's fair or what's unfair in our healing journey. And that's a form of negative thought loops and these negative pathways that we have to stop. And that's again where I'm always very cautious to say we don't want to be stuck in toxic positivity or gaslighting in our system and in our community. And I don't think that just blindly following a limbic system healing protocol is going to get rid of all illness. I don't think just blindly following it is going to cure you completely. But I do think that understanding the connection between our cognitions, our beliefs, our emotions, our values, and how that impacts our nervous system, everything from our enteric nervous system, our gut health, our gut-brain axis, our limbic system, our sense of fight or flight and danger, our polyvagal system, how that impacts social engagement, our ability to be in existence in community with others. All of that factors in, and a lot of it comes not just from the trauma we've experienced, but our perception of that trauma. If you've ever read Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, talking about finding meaning and value in life despite going through the Holocaust, that's one of those examples that comes up over and over again with like existentialism and humanism, and feeling that if you can change that perception of your circumstances despite your circumstances and change your beliefs about your circumstances, that's half the battle in healing. So we might have gotten caught up in this, or we might see other people caught up in this blame game which very often then leads to shame and guilt and feeling stuck and this learned helplessness, or helplessness and hopelessness, and external locus of control versus internal locus of control, which are the cornerstones of depression from a therapeutic perspective. My work going through grad school for counseling, we learn that, hopelessness, helplessness, and thinking that all of the external circumstances is all these things beyond your control that are making you sick or making you feel depressed. If you keep up in that mindset, you're destined to stay sick because you don't have hope that you can get better. You don't believe that you are able to help yourself. You don't believe that you have the power, and you're looking to maybe blame external sources because it feels more comfortable than taking ownership. Not to say there aren't a lot of external sources working against us. Sometimes there are. How do we begin to tackle this insurmountable obstacle of living in a world that's full of toxins and EMFs and mold and negative people and trauma? However, it is our job to live our best lives regardless. There's that quote where, you're not responsible for the trauma that happened to you, but you are responsible to fix yourself and your reaction. And I think that we're in a world where there's, especially in the mental health field where I work every day, sometimes we do a disservice when we focus too much on, okay, well, who hurt you, and what are all these things that are against you, and systemically you're so oppressed that you can't change it. I understand wanting to, from an activism side, focus on that, and we need powerful people to step up and to be activists to fight against systemic oppression and systemic pollution and all of the things that cause trauma and illness. We think about, I'm not going to go over it too much because those are triggers that we want to avoid thinking of in depth, but the things that have contributed to making you sick. And if we have people that can look at that from a systemic way and then advocate for real changes to eliminate some of those triggers, then yes, that's awesome. But you hyper-focusing on them and constantly just placing the blame on the external triggers isn't going to make them go away. It's not going to change or fix the systems that are at play. So at some point, we have to shift our energy, which is so valuable to conserve. We have to conserve that energy and shift it to just healing ourselves and to just focusing on what can we do to take ownership and responsibility and every day wake up with a goal, and to do that behavioral activation from the CBT model of I have to stop the thoughts. When they come up and the triggers come up, I have to say, no, we are not messing with that anymore. We are committed to healing. So tomorrow when I wake up, I'm going to do the same routine. I'm going to wake up and I'm going to connect with nature and sit in the sun and be grateful for what I have. And I'm going to work on my thought changing techniques and visualize myself as I'm healing. It doesn't mean that we are looking at it from an unrealistic perspective, but we are really trying to take ownership in a way that lets us feel empowered, and maybe for the first time in a long time, because a lot of medical trauma stems from feeling disempowered and feeling that we've been told that we can't heal ourselves or find any sort of healing outside of a Western model of medicine. So I really just want to step in and say that, there's no perfect way to heal, and we're never going to fully heal all of the problems that we have. But it starts with a sense of taking ownership and feeling empowered that we're the only ones that can heal ourselves. And it starts with honoring that most of these issues stem from trauma, but that's not a reason to hate the world and get caught up in just feeling helpless and saying, it's not worth it, everything's hopeless because everything's trauma. It's actually quite the opposite. It's saying that because it's an imperfect world, why not use every fiber of our being to create hope and beauty in a small way, just in our own daily routine, in our own social circle, in our own family, in our own friends group, and that the empowerment we should feel doesn't come from fighting systems. It comes from creating our own small networks to create small changes that allow us to feel better. And then over time, maybe that does allow us to do more, enact more change on a systemic level. But we're not going to get there, sitting behind a keyboard and complaining all day and being on these chronic illness forums and just going over and over about our misery and commiserating and actually sharing misery, right? Commiserating. because that's not enacting the change. So how do we focus on, how do I make every day a day that's worth living and worth healing? And how do I focus on the things in this world that do have beauty and meaning and purpose so that I want to enjoy them? And then being able to say, even if it's not perfect, even if some of these symptoms, I don't plan that they're going to go away anytime soon, if I can find things worth living for and things with value that motivate me to still go out and do them and practice them and enjoy them despite limitations or symptoms, that's where we need to start. And I would hope that, again, over time, if as a community we all are healing and we're seeing that connection with nature and holistic modalities and with our sense of communing with each other and sharing these very basic, integrative, some of them very ancient practices, if this helps us to heal, then overall that is its own form of advocacy. It's its own form of going against the systems that made us sick in the first place, because we're opting out of them. And we're doing it in a very organic way that doesn't have to involve, anger and misery, but involves just saying, wow, trying this new way of being and living holistically and tuning in with my natural ability to heal and tuning in with the fact that the natural world around me is giving me what I need to heal, and that if I let my limbic system regulate with nature and with my sense of community, I'm starting to heal every day a little bit more. That is the ultimate way of really fighting any kind of systemic issues that are going on, because we're opting out of a broken system and we're leading by example and showing other people who need healing that that is the true way to heal, and then they jump on board. So I just wanted to, it might have sounded like a rant, and I hope it didn't sound like an angry rant. I think it's a positive thing to talk about, but I think it's just a really interesting concept where I never want my contribution to the limbic system world to feel that it is giving a false hope, or to feel that it is that, okay, just do it this way and you're going to be all better. Because I think, any of this idea of like money back guarantee, heal your limbic system, it's so disingenuous, and it's part of the problem. The problem is externalizing the idea of health, and externalizing that you need someone else to tell you how to do it, and externalizing that it's not within your power if you don't have this system. But what I want it to feel like is this idea of community and integration, and how do we work together to remember and to reconnect with our innate wisdom of what we need, and our culture, our community's innate wisdom of what has worked for millions of years that we've become disconnected from. And that does start with nature, and that does start with connecting with spirit and intuition. So anyway, I hope that this is useful or helpful, and I know other people are feeling the same way, because everyone who's messaging me and commenting, I think this is just a growing train of thought in our community, and I wanted to try to put words to it from my perspective. But hope you're all having a really blessed week, and really feeling into that healing journey and thinking about what your values are and what you want to integrate into your life. So I'll talk to you all soon.